but I want to get it rocking. It's not doing much right now. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to get some spices together now, okay? One thing I'm going to throw in real quick is a bay leaf or two. Oh, Sherry, good to see ya. Too bad you don't have induction. Hey, I'll pull it in one of these days. I'll pull it in one of these days. Okay, so a couple of bay leaves in there. Let's talk about Latin spices, okay? I have toasted off some spices today. Sometimes I don't toast my spices. If I'm gonna do a dry heat cooking method like grilling or roasting or something like that, I will not toast my spices because they'll toast on the grill. They'll toast in the oven, right? If I toast them ahead of time, they're gonna char on the grill. They're gonna char in the oven. So I do not pre-toast my spices for those. But this, you can see steam, or at least I can see steam coming out of this. This is moist in here. I'm never gonna get toasted spices with this. So I pre-toasted my spices. I've got a little bit of cumin seed in there. I've got a little bit of coriander seed in there. And then I also tossed in a little bit of chili powder as well, right at the end after those other spices were toasted. And that chili powder, it just kind of went in for about a minute, and then I was done toasting. I've got whole spices in there, and I need to break those up, and so I'm going to use one of my favorite tools in the kitchen. It is so not appreciated enough, my mortar and pestle here. Let me straighten things out here for you guys. It's like you had an earthquake there or something. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and drop all of my toasted spices into that mortar pestle, get rid of that pot, and I'm going to start working it. Working it. Work it with me, everybody. Come on now. Work it, work it. I'm going to toss this pot. Toss things around in there a little bit. I don't want to burn anything. Don't want to burn garlic. Everybody's nice and happy. Like I said, we're on about 8 out of 11 here. And so I might be turning that down in one sec. But right now I'm trying to cook the moisture out of those onions. I'm going to stick my face in the flames one of these days. Still getting used to this home cooking show. So I was saying that we work our dry spices in during the sweating process. So hey, we're sweating right now. In go my spices. I'm gonna leave a little bit out. Nah, I'm gonna throw it all in. I didn't have that much. By the way, you don't see me measuring here, guys. It's a little of this, a little of that. It's my goal to get more people to have a little more confidence in the kitchen. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. A little too much cumin, hey, next time a little less, right? Or a little too much chili powder, hey, next time a little less, okay? There's a million recipes out there. People ask me for recipes all the time. It's like, hey, go find a recipe and think about what we talked about. That's what I want to get across is those techniques behind the recipes. I don't want to share recipes. There's plenty of recipes. You don't need recipes for me. I want to talk about technique. Okay, so right now, I've worked in a little bit of spice. I've got a bay leaf in there. Again, those spices were a little bit of cumin, a little chili powder. I usually go about half and half on those guys, equal amounts. And then, another thing I want to throw in that I didn't throw in yet, oregano. A lot of people don't realize, Latin cooking has a little bit of oregano in there. The Sonoran Desert's full of oregano. It grows like crazy out there. Let's see. Bada bada bing boom. I'm reading comments here. Hey Tom, thanks for showing up. Welcome, welcome. Starting to smell like a Mexican restaurant in here right now. I'm going to turn that down a little bit. My pan looks a little dry. When I added those spices, the oil just kind of soaked them right up. I'm going to hit it with just a tiny bit. If it's looking dry, don't be afraid to add a little more oil, a little more fat. Fat is flavor. Fat is the vehicle for your flavor. You need that. Stir that around. That was loud. And I'm going to add one more item here. I'm going to throw in a little tomato paste for it. Hey, like Spanish rice. By the way, if I was doing Spanish rice here, exactly the same thing, right? If I was doing an enchilada sauce, exactly the same thing, right? It's that idea of sweating. There are so many things where we sweat our spices and everything into aromatic vegetables. So many dishes, almost any one pot dish on the planet. Soup, spaghetti sauce, chili, like I've been saying, like we're making right now, right? It just goes on and on and on. Just about every one-pot dish in the world starts out with a little bit of sweating of the spices. And this is where we lay down the foundation of the flavor. I love just tossing stuff in my kitchen here. It's hilarious. Good thing my wife's not around. So, if you can see that, this is what in Latin cuisine we call the sofrito, basically. It's the tomato, the onions, the garlic, the spices, all cooking together. It's the base layer of flavor for a lot of your Mexican cuisine, right? Or Latin cuisine. Or Tex-Mex, or whatever. I mentioned I lived in San Antonio. It was all that. So it's cruising along. I'm going to check out my, while that's going, I'm going to turn down a little bit now that I got that tomato product in there. Now I'm on about 5 out of 11, okay, on the Spinal Tap scale. If you don't know Spinal Tap, check out their album. You better not. Okay, I can see a little bit of golden brown starting to accumulate. The skin is very, very soft. Don't do this at home. I got hot hands. You're going to burn yourself here. Okay. Yeah, it's a little bit warm. Got a little funky thing there. Hold on. And I'm going to go ahead and use my knife to test. By the way, everybody always asks about my favorite knives. I'm going to do a little commercial here. I don't get paid for this, but I love, there's a brand called Forstner. It's the Vitrino knife company that makes the Swiss Army knives. I love these little plastic paring knives from these guys. They're about $1.99. They're super flexible. Can you see the flex on that blade? They're super lightweight, and I can get an edge up on these things in seconds, okay, with a steel or something like that. My favorite little blade. It's $1.99. If it accidentally falls in a garbage can in a busy kitchen somewhere, I'm not crying about it, okay? They're super cheap, and hey, that's Vitrino steel. It's Swiss steel. It's a decent little blade for $1.99 or $3 or whatever. They're dirt cheap, and I just love how light they are and how they feel in my hand. So I'm going to give this a few little pokes, and yeah, it's going in like a hot knife through butter. That's what I'm looking for, right? Give you guys another little look at that just so you can get a visual. I'm stabbing, I'm stabbing, I'm stabbing, okay? So I'm going to set that aside and let that cool, and I don't necessarily need to let it cool, but I can't really handle these guys to scoop out the delicious shredded-like flesh from the interior, okay? So I'm going to set that aside until I can get my hands around those things. And I'm going back to my spices, my sofrito that I'm doing in this pot. It's starting to stick a little bit on the bottom, but that is okay. Now I'm going to continue to cook this. It's still, look, the tomato paste that I added in there, it's still about the same color as it was when I put it in. I always say I like to get another, half shade of color on it, just a little bit darker than it was. It was like bright red, and now I want to get it just a little less, a little darker. That's what I'm trying to say. Let me get another spoon here. I need to try another bean. My lentils are done. I'm trying these little pinquillos. They're getting softer, but they are not there. I'm going to bump up that heat again. It looked like it was a little tepid. It was just not doing it for me. Yeah, kind of a dry bean. I need a little one of these. Let's do this, everybody. I kind of feel like I've got to have a little wine going here because, after all, it is happy hour. All right. So let's see. Joe O'Connor, thanks for coming. Autumn, good to see you. Again, I haven't seen too many questions out there. If you guys got questions, or if any chefs out there, I know I got some chef people out there, some food people. Throw out some ideas, guys. I'm trying to keep up. Let's see. Whoops. Oh, no. Boop, boop, boop. Your pan should already be hot. Too bad you don't have it. Oh, I saw that one already. Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions. Is that one? Sorry I came in late. Somebody said something about, he looks like Henry Rollins. Ooh, he's dreamy. Henry Rollins. I'm going to switch to a wooden spoon here. I was using just a little metal spoon, but I don't want a lot of metal on metal here. So I'm going to get my wooden spoon, and I'm actually going to start scraping the bottom of this pan. Smells like chili in here to me. And my sofrito is darker, okay? One of the things I always told my students, some of these things, you want it to be ugly, okay? I would always say the ugliest one wins. I was talking about that in another one of these the other day. I'm sure if I got any of my old culinary students out there, they're familiar with that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I've got my lentils that I cooled off earlier. And I'm going to go ahead and pull out those veggies that I used. I mentioned that they're kind of like, it's just like pulling out a bay leaf or something from a pot, which I have a few of them here. I'm going to use my knife to kind of help me grab things. Like here's a onion. I'm going to get rid of that. I could chop it up and mix it on in, but I got a bunch of onion in here already. So toss that. I got this celery. There's not a lot of flavor left in that. I got a carrot. I've got a few tiny little pieces of onion in there. I'm just going to leave them in there. And then I'm going to pull my bay leaves out of there. I've still got 2 bay leaves in this other pot. And there's my other one. Always count your bay leaves when they go in so you can count them on the way out. There's a little trick. That's a trick they don't tell you on food TV. I am going to drain some of the liquid out of these little beauties here. So I got kind of a little strainer set up. And I'm saving my juice just in case I want to use it for adjustments. That's good juice. And potentially a lot of nutrients in there. Now I didn't measure my water. You can do the beans here with just the bare minimum of water and just keep adding water in as they cook. And that way you don't have a lot of juice, you're not losing nutrients if you strain or anything like that. But I've got my heat down, and I'm just going to add my lentils on in. And that basically is an instant lentil chili. Like I said, I do a neutral bean in the beginning of the week. I can flavor it using this technique of sweating. I didn't have to go Latin. I could have gone curry, couldn't I? I could have done like an Indian curry with my lentils or something like that. I could have done, hey, barbecue style or something, right? I could take it any direction I want if I make my beans lentil, or if I make my legumes neutral in the beginning of the show or at the beginning of the week. So I've got a little bit of, it just kind of looks like lentil chili at this point. It's a little bit dry. I still have some moisture to adjust. And I'm still looking at these other beans. I'm not quite sure if they're going to get there by the end of this happy hour. But they won't be too much longer. I'm just crushing one first. Oh, they're getting quite close. Earlier I talked about checking your beans. Never trust a bean, okay? The one bean I tried is probably the only bean in there that's ready to go, okay? I always try more than one bean. Let me get another one of these guys, another few. Try about 6 or 8. Whoops. Not quite there, but they are super, super close. Let's show you this this beautiful spaghetti squash real quick. Let me see how I want to do this here. I've just got all my beans and grains all set aside. And let me just get a bowl. Usually I have that out ahead of time. I always forget one thing. It's always one thing every time. All right, so next thing I want is one of these guys. Got it right here. And I feel like I can handle these guys. If it's a little hard, I might just get a little towel or something, a little paper towel. If it's a little hot, I mean to say. So I got a few paper towels here. I'm gonna grab that squash. And you can see the inside, it's got some like splits in it on the inside. That's the grain of this squash. It's gonna scoop out and it's gonna shred up on its own just like spaghetti, hence the name. It's a little hot, I'll keep it down on the surface here. So just scooping this up, let me adjust that camera a little. Not sure how well you can see that, but I just scooped one half of it and now I'm scooping the other half. And then I got one more piece over here. Here's some more of that. And we'll see how those shreds look in just one sec. Scooping it out. Ouch. It's a little hot. Don't try this at home. Again, some of my cookie friends out there, you got the hot hands, you know what I'm talking about. And out it comes. I'm going to set this aside right there. I'm running out of space in my tiny little kitchen. And then what I want to do, let me wash a hand here. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to get a fork and I'm going to fluff this squash up so it comes apart. Before I really start fluffing it, I'm going to add a little more spice to it. I've still got a little of that spice blend from before. So I'm throwing in a little more because there was a lot of flesh there that we need to finish up. And I am going to grate a little bit of fresh nutmeg into this too, okay? This spaghetti squash, I'm leaving it fairly neutral. These aren't really big flavors. And I'm grating across the entire surface of it here. I'm not just keeping it in one spot. I want to disperse it a little bit so I don't have to do all my dispersal with a spoon or a fork. And then I just want to break up that squash. Very gently with the tips of that fork. And it's just starting to come apart, you know, like spaghetti. Once I get it broken up, I'm going to give it a little taste. And I think I'm going to throw a little pat of butter in with this as well, just to give it, again, a little bit more body. And it is shredding up beautifully. Spaghetti squash. It's a beautiful thing, okay? I'm going to add a pat of butter. I'm going to work it in. I don't want to break this stuff up too much more. Just a tiny little pat. Hey, guys out there. Steve, hanging out. I'm going to break that butter up. I just tossed it in. Usually I cut it up a little bit. So I'm just going to use my fork to break it into more pieces, and it'll blend in more efficiently if it's not just all in one piece. I don't want to do too much stirring because I'll break up this squash. As the butter's melting, you don't want to stop moving. You'll get a little grease slick in there. So keep it moving as that butter melts. And I'll break up those pieces a little more so it's a little more efficient. And just keep it moving. I don't want oily. I want that butter to become one with the squash. And the way to do that is to keep it moving. We're mounting. This is what we call it in culinary school. When we finish with butter, we keep it moving and it blends in to what you're doing. And there it is. I'm going to give it one little taste just to check seasoning here. It's actually delicious, but I'm going to pretend like it needs more. I'm going to throw a little more salt in there. It could stand it. And then I'll work that on in. Now I got a spoon, and our spaghetti squash is finished for this evening. Came out beautifully. I'm really liking the very delicate flavors. It's got a tiny little afterburn from the cayenne I used in there. It's really nice. And there's my squash, okay? It's a beautiful thing. I'm gonna kind of wipe that on down. My rim is ugly. Let me just get that. And there she is. I'm gonna put a plate on top of this just to hold the heat in. Keep it someplace warm. I'm gonna strain my quinoa because it's sitting in a little bit of water here. And I'm gonna try my beans one last time. I'm hoping they're done. If they are, we're gonna be very impressed because of all my beautiful timing here. Let me get one more spoon out. And we're trying a couple of beans. That one's done. That one's done. That one's kind of done. You know, they don't come out of a machine. It's a natural product. They aren't all going to have the exact same cooking time. I'm going to try a few more. He's done. He's done. I think I've done it. My timing is really working out. I'm going to strain these beans with my same setup. I've reserved all of my juices. It's almost like a beanstalk. Beanstalk. I'm going to blend that in with my chili. Because I'm just making one big old pot of chili here. And then, my pot looks a little dry here. I'm going to pull out my veggies, like I did with the lentils, right? So there's an onion, a celery, and a carrot. I got a few bay leaves to come out. I've got 4 in there now. I've got 2 types of bean in here, lentils and piquilos. And then I've got some of my liquid here. I'm just going to adjust my chili with a little bit of that liquid. It's just a little dry. Once I'm done here, all I need to do is adjust seasoning and consistency. And I've got myself a vegetarian chili with a grain accompaniment on the side. And I've also got some spaghetti squash to serve along with it as a side. Not exactly the menu I would put on a restaurant menu or something, but it's what I got around during the quarantine. And I thought I'd turn a lesson into it, and we saw a ton of stuff today. Let me just bring this the rest of the way, and we will sum up our day and get you guys on the road. One more taste. Now, I did not season that second set of beans. I didn't salt them, I mean to say. I'm just going to add a little more salt, and it's not that it needs salt. Like if I took a bean out and licked it, it would have plenty of seasoning on the outside, but it's the interior. I need to work salt into the interior, so I'm going to work a little more salt into this. And that's about it. I want to finish with some herbs. I got a little cilantro and a little scallion. Here's a little knife thing here, okay? Cleaning scallions, I left them uncleaned here. They've got the dirt on the end. The way you clean scallions is you cut off the end, that root end. I'm gonna throw that in a stock pot somewhere. And then it's easy to peel off the nasty bits. Sometimes if you have just kind of a funky little scallion green on the end, that'll all come off. But I always take off that root end first, and then it's very easy to peel off the ugly stuff. And then I will rinse them off. Or you can just peel it as it's being rinsed. So I got a couple of scallions here, and I'm going to mix them with a little cilantro. That'll be my finish, and we will be done. With that, we'll sum it up and get it gone. I'm doing these herbs super, super thin. Let me show you my handwork here. I think you guys can see that. Let me get this off the board. I never want anything on my board if I'm cutting. All I want on my board is what I'm working on. I was talking about this in a quarantine happy hour just the other day. Work like a sushi chef. Imagine if you were at a sushi restaurant and the chef had 9 things going on his cutting board. It would be pretty gross. Fish and scallions and everything just being cut up all on one board laying out there. Work with one item, wipe it on down, work with your next item. So I'm going to work in a little bit of fresh green onion, and I can work this in at the end. I'm just going to work it in now. And then I've got a bunch of cilantro. I've already taken stems out. Sometimes, actually, cilantro stems aren't too bad if you leave them into kind of a rustic, like pico de gallo or something like that. But I also like cilantro stems for my stocks. I think they have a really nice flavor in the background of my stocks. So I tend to throw my stems into my stock pot and use the leaves for love. Stems for stock, leaves for love. So I just did a chiffonade on those, so it's kind of rustic looking, but it's still a real cut. It's not just a rough chop. It's a shave. So everything is in the pot that needs to be in the pot. I'm going to stir it on in. I'll give it one more taste. And then we'll sum up. I like the amount of liquid I have in here. Everything's looking good. I want to point out nothing was measured today. It's all good. So, this is a mess. I got to get this out of here. My OCD kicking in badly. So basically what you guys just saw, it was a lot of stuff, right? The first thing I did was I started a spaghetti squash. That's the roasting vegetables technique, right? Or roasting any winter squash, basically. If I'm roasting like a softer vegetable, I'm just tossing it in oil, throwing it in there, and I'm using a super hot oven because I want to develop color when I roast something, so people can see that it's been roasted, right? If you don't get any color on your zucchini in the oven, but you're calling it roasted veg, people are going to be wondering what's going on back there. There's no color on this thing, right? We started two types of legumes. I started a lentil. That one went really quick. I started a small version of a pinto bean here called a bean kilo. It's like a half-size pinto bean. When we started those, we just put them in water. We soaked the larger bean. We didn't soak the lentil. You do not need to soak a lentil. The cooking time's very short. But we put them in a pot with aromatics. I used bay leaf, garlic, onion, celery, and carrot, okay? Basically, those last three are mirepoix, the French term mirepoix, okay? I left them in big pieces so they could be lifted out and discarded later. I cooked those legumes until they were tender to the teeth. I left salt out in the beginning. Once they were done, that's when I worked my salt in, and I let them just kind of sit in that salty water and soak up the seasoning at that point. I cooked off a grain, and we talked about the boiling method for grains. What you saw me do is exactly what I would do for polenta, for cream of wheat, for pasta, for cooking wheat berries or any like kamut or any hard grain. You start with boiling water, you rein the grain in, and you stir it immediately. In the first few minutes of cooking, keep stirring so things don't clump up together. And then once they're kind of rolling along, you can kind of ease up on the stirring a little bit, but you still want to kind of keep an eye on. Once that was going for this quinoa, I knew it was done when a little band or a little string popped off of the edge of the grains, and you could see them. I wish you could see that, but the camera work here is never going to kind of show that kind of detail on this. So my apologies for that. But if you ever do cook quinoa, if you've ever done it before, you know what I'm talking about. Once that grain was done, I work my I can taste it for seasoning and what have you, but it's essentially done at that point, and you've got yourself a neutral grain. We also talked about sweating, okay? And I sweated off some garlic and some onion, and I added in some cumin and some chili powder in equal parts, those two, and I threw in some oregano and a bay leaf and a few garlics in there and all of that. I cooked all of that down. In this case, I added a little tomato product to it, and then we added it all together, and I came out with chili. I'm going to do another class one of these days where I talk about 8 or 9 different flavor profiles from around the world. Hey, what does Thai cuisine use? What does French cuisine use? What does Latin America use? What does Middle East, and so on and so on? What does Asia use? What is China versus Japan and things like that, right? So we'll talk about different flavor profiles around the world. And let's see, I'm trying to think of anything else. We finished the spaghetti squash. Gosh, that was pretty much it. Let me get on here. If anybody has any questions, please throw them out in the comments. I'll get to them after we're done here, after I clean this giant pile of dishes here. I got a lot of pots and pans. Also, I want to kind of throw it out there, price of admission. Hey, I'm giving you guys the culinary lecture that I do in culinary school, right? It's what people spend thousands of dollars on every day. Or, you know, some of my students don't pay anything, but they had to be incarcerated before they got this stuff, right? So big price to pay for this stuff. I'm throwing it out there. Probably, you know, mostly because I'm going a little stir crazy in my house and I got to get this stuff out. But the other thing, I'm trying to build a little something here. I got a little side gig that I call industry cooking classes, and I'm trying to go out and do live shows in the public and bring people along, show them what we talk about in culinary arts school. It's not what you see on food TV, and I really want to get the message out there that this stuff ain't magic, it ain't rocket science. This stuff's totally easy. You don't see me measuring. It's all technique. The recipes are about, the conversation I want to have is about the techniques behind the recipe, okay? If you could, get on my page, follow me, get on my industry cooking classes page, share it with your friends, invite friends to these things if you find it's worthwhile. I'm hoping I'm putting some good information out there. I gotta say, I feel like I put a ton of technique out there today. It's a little disjointed just because I'm in my little kitchen working with what I got, but ultimately, you just keep on coming. After a while, this stuff just starts, you start recognizing patterns, and this stuff starts snowballing, and your knowledge base of the kitchen is going to get bigger and bigger, and your kitchen muscles are going to get stronger and more buffed out, right? That's what this is all about. So hang with me. I'm doing this every Monday. I don't want to do it every day. You know, I don't think my wife could handle it, but I do it every Monday, and then if I need to do something during the week, hey, I might throw an extra one out there. But please check in with me, share me with your friends. I want to blow this thing up. I really want people to cook for themselves and not just have to break open a recipe every time they need to make a move in the kitchen. I want you to have those kitchen superpowers, okay? So I think I'm going to leave it at that, guys. Let me do one more of these. Thanks very much for showing up to another Culinary Kitchen Happy Hour, and we'll see you next Monday, if not before, folks. Cheers and prost, okay? Take care, and we'll see you on the flip side. Don't forget, the party is always in the kitchen. Bye-bye, peoples.